Today on the Locked On Hornets podcast, we welcome James Plowright to talk some lineup numbers, and we take a look at James Bouknight and Kai Jones. That's all coming up today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, your team every day, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, local experts on the #1 daily sports podcast network. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and you can subscribe to the podcast on any of those channels, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get them. You know the drill by now. And you can follow us on Twitter at Walker Mail, at Doug Branson LOH, and you can follow the show handle on Twitter at Locked On Hornets. Excited to welcome James Plowright to the show today. You can find him on Twitter at British_Buzz. You can find his work on at the Hive, their Twitter handle. We're giving out Twitter handles left and right like we're Oprah, at _the_Hive. Put your underscores in there if you want to
_Hive.
That's right. James, thanks so much for joining us, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm buoyed by the Hornets' current 3-game winning streak and beating the Warriors, which was, I'm not saying it was the most high-scoring game, but it was a fun game. So I'm doing good, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, James. We appreciate you joining us. And it was a fun game, especially at the end, and especially because the Hornets won. Miles Bridges coming up with a big bucket at the end of that one. And so we're going to get to some of the lineup numbers, as you mentioned, the starting lineup, getting some scoring, 3 different guys scoring 20. None of them were Gordon Hayward, and they were still able to get the victory, which was nice to see. We'll go on the whole recall, assign young players to the G League train. I think JT Thor and Vernon Carey are assigned to Greensboro. I don't know if they've been recalled yet, but those guys go back and forth, and they're at home, man. Greensboro is close enough to Charlotte where they're going to be putting them back and forth, so we'll get to that in just a moment as well. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the numbers, though, here, James, because I know you wanted to bring up some of the things defensively that they've been doing to help turn it around. If you look at the last 3 games, their last 3 wins, the most points they've allowed is 108, and that was to Memphis to start this 3-game winning streak off. Since then, I think it was like 106, 102. The next 2 contests. So, yeah, I mean, you see what the Hornets have been able to do here, James. What's been some of the things you've noticed on that end of the floor?
Well, I think the low watermark was this Kings game, right? I think they gave up 140 points, and it just felt like the Kings could get wherever they want. From 3, Richaun Holmes feasted inside. And the last couple of weeks, really since the 2nd November, there's kind of been a real shift. And the offense has suffered at expense a little bit, I think probably because getting out and running a little bit less, focusing a little bit more on securing the defensive rebound. Because unsurprisingly, the Hornets, what seems like the 8th season in a row, have struggled to get defensive rebounds to start the year. But that's definitely been an area of focus. But also, if you look at kind of when Jaden McDaniels started playing, since he started playing, he's really brought some good defensive energy and length. And I think I was pushing the Kelly Oubre kind of best defensive player on this team propaganda story from preseason. And that has not been the case. He's been effective offensively, but defensively, it's not been there really. And Jalen McDaniels has taken a really big kind of leap defensively this year, looked sure of himself, had a really good kind of late second half in the Warriors game. So he's not the only reason, but I think getting a little bit taller, a little bit more rim protection, a little bit better physicality with Jalen McDaniels in there, I think it's definitely played a part.
Well, and I want to talk a little more about Kelly, too, because, James, I know that was the idea. He's an athletic wing. You can put him at 2, 3, maybe even some small ball 4, but really at that 2 and 3 with Kelly Oubre. And to me, I feel like he just hasn't been handling switches well. I think it's been the team defense that he's really struggled with, too, where he's just not recognizing to come over and help, and then when he does, it's in the wrong situation, and he leaves his guy wide open. There have been multiple times where you've noticed that. Is there a way where that gets better? Is there a way where, okay, Kelly just needs to be in the system a little more? After all, we are only 15 games into the season, or is this a real enough problem? That's why you're seeing the minutes go up and down with Kelly. And do you think this is kind of what we probably are just going to see all the way through the year?
I mean, I think part of the reason, and my actually co-host on At the Hive Live, Chase, made this on our podcast the other week, was he's played a lot of shooting guard this year, and that was largely because of Terry, because Terry was injured to start the year. But he's logged more minutes in shooting guard this last year, percentage of minutes, than in like any season since going back to like Washington time. So I think that's definitely part of it. He's played more on the perimeter, where you're not kind of able to go and help as much as kind of when you're playing at the back or when you're guarding a 3 or a 4. So I do wonder, with Terry Rozier being back, him hopefully playing a little bit more 3, that's just going to help him, and he's not going to be left out on the island against smaller guards as much. But I'm being honest, Walker, I've just not seen like him getting down in the stance and looking really engaged. Like if you go back and watch tape from when he was in Phoenix and Washington, like he was getting low, he was getting into guys, and he's just not, it seems to be approaching the matchups with the same like tenacity as what we've seen on tape. And I think it's not been exactly what we expected. And can he sort it out? I really do think it's down to him and his approach. Like I think he's almost viewing himself more of an offensive player at the moment than a defensive one. And I don't think that's what this team needs, despite his mixed success so far.
Oh no! If it was going to work, there were two things people were discussing with Kelly Oubre as the biggest points of emphasis with why it was a good signing. It was the defensive end of the floor, at least with the masses and people that liked this. It was the defensive end of the floor, and it was also him being able to take over if Gordon Hayward goes down with injury and not have this huge, significant drop-off. You know, it's not Gordon Hayward. I don't think anybody was truly arguing that. But you get the point. You had some depth there to help out. And now, as we've mentioned, we've done this a lot on LOH, but Kelly, the minutes have been down, even in an overtime game a couple of times ago. You know, he's still not playing as many minutes, even with the ejection, right? And so, you know, it's been interesting to see that development on what was their biggest free agent signing. You know, that was the guy that was their biggest move outside of drafting James Bouknight, trading for Kai Jones. It wasn't Ish Smith. It wasn't trading for Mason Plumlee, even though he's played a lot more minutes. It was getting Kelly Oubre. Jalen McDaniels, you know I love him. Anybody that listens to the show knows I really like what he can bring this team, and so it's really nice to see what he's been able to do on the defensive end of the floor. I always thought he had nice instincts, and right now I like to see that come to fruition. Doug, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, as we kind of wrap this segment on defense, we talked about individual players and their contributions or lack thereof, but James, what are you seeing schematically? Like, what has Borrego been able to introduce into this team that has kind of gotten them on track defensively?
Yeah, so I think the big thing you heard about early on was like teams were getting to they weren't getting to the rim. They're getting to the rim whenever they wanted and essentially shooting a really high percentage there. And if you actually look at the data, that still hasn't changed too much in terms of the shot location. Like the shot location is still not great for Charlotte. They're trying to protect the rim, but they give out loads of 3-point shots. What's really changed is the opponent percentages. Like in the last 2 weeks at the rim, opponents are shooting just under 64%. They were at 68 before that. From mid-range, they were shooting 44%. They're now shooting 40%. And then from 3-point, it's about the same. So really that kind of rim and mid-range opponent shooting percentages has really gone down. I think generally, like there's just been less defensive breakdowns. There's been more communication that helps them better. There's been better rotations. I think it's a little bit people getting used to playing with each other. I thought Terry Rozier was really good on Steph the other night. And even though you don't view him as a defensive stopper, I think his ability to communicate as a leader, even though his offensive game has not really been there apart from in a couple of games, defensively, he's been really helping that side of the ball because he is one of the veteran leaders for this team.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of understated it there because people killed Terry Rozier for his defense, especially last season when he was having this guy over this way.
Very much so.
And he really, we talked a lot about the tip that he won yesterday or on yesterday's show. But my God, yeah, the defense that he and Cody Martin and Borrego called it out in the press conference. I mean, the defense that they showed on Steph Curry helped win that game, helped seal that deal.
Yeah, all right, let's go to the offensive numbers in the next segment, but I do want to talk about Theragun first before we do that. It's a handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tension using scientifically calibrated combos of depth, speed, and power, and it's as quiet as an electric toothbrush. It's pretty quiet. The Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good, too. It's good to the source of the pain by releasing tension. It uses Theragun's signature percussive therapy, which goes 60% deeper than vibration generation alone. The OLED screen and design makes you feel like you're holding something from the future. Just go to their site, check it out, and the Theragun app learns from your behaviors and suggests guided routines. Theragun is trusted by 250 professional sports teams like Real Madrid and elite athletes like Paul George, DeAndre Hopkins, Maria Sharapova, hundreds of thousands of customers, and it's also trusted by me. So go check out Theragun. Try Theragun for 30 days, starting at only $199. Go to therabody.com/lockedon right now and get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's therabody.com/lockedon. therabody.com/lockedon. All right, we talked about the defense. Let's go to the offense on the other side of this break with James Plowright coming up next on Locked On Hornets.
This is Locked On Hornets.
They're running their rookies to Greensboro. They're driving them to Greensboro and then driving them back the same day to play in an NBA game. I cannot wait until the Hornets load manage.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Yeah, we'll get to that whole driving back and forth in just a moment with Kai Jones, James Bouknight, even a Vernon Carey, and a JT Thor. I want to get into the offensive numbers here in just a moment, too, but we were playing with a segment idea with James Plowright for the next time he comes on the show. I want James Plowright to do a dramatic reading of one just little excerpt of any of the articles, any of the pieces he puts out there for At the Hive on the next Locked On Hornets podcast that he joins us with. And James, I know you're are you down with that? Are you willing to come on this podcast? We're video now, so you can be seen doing this. Are you down to do that next time as James Plowright?
I'm not only down, I am willing to put on the finest traditional British accent for all your listeners, which I'm sure they will enjoy.
William shakes no fear.
Yes, that's right. And did you just say you are also related to a famous actor, right? So this thing runs in your blood.
This is true. So my great uncle is Laurence Olivier, who is like known as the greatest Shakespearean actor of all time. And he was like won Oscars, and they have awards named after him and everything like that. And how I ended up covering basketball, I didn't quite follow the traditional, Shakespearean actor path, but it's a different path,
My fourth cousin twice removed is Gary Busey, who is considered one of the greatest American actors of all time. So
are we doing this? I've got one to contribute.
I was completely a lie, but
man, I fell for it. I really thought he's just such a random name to bring up. I thought Gary Busey was going to be it.
I don't even know who that is. I'm not going to lie.
Well,
I'm showing my lack of American knowledge here, I'm afraid.
Look, he's beneath you, man. You're related to Shakespearean guys. Like, that's so beneath you. I
think Gary Busey's pretty Shakespearean.
I guess that's true. I think I'm twice removed from Cloris Leachman. Anybody? She's in The Longest Yard. She's... I don't know what else she's in, to be honest with you.
I'll look it up.
Of my dome. I think that's about it. All right, so that's who I'm related to. Either way, we're going to bring that next time James joins us. Let's get to some of the offensive numbers, James. I saw the tweet that you had. I'm trying to pull it up here real quickly, but you said here in the last few games that defensively they're actually 15th over the last 2 weeks. Excuse me. You said the Hornets have been 24th in offense. It's a very big difference from what was happening early on, and they're 15th in defense. Just talked about the defense. What's going on offense with the Charlotte Hornets team?
I think it's a combination of things. Firstly, PJ Washington's not been playing and was by far the best backup center. And like Nick Richards has shown flashes of being a borderline rotation player, which we've all got very excited about. But we also have to remember, like, offensively, comparing him to PJ Washington is just completely not fair. And that backup unit generally has struggled over the last 2 weeks quite a bit. So I think that's part of it. I also think to start the year, the shooting percentages are just kind of coming back down to earth a little bit. I mean, LaMelo, Miles Bridges, Kelly Oubre were shooting like 45, 50% from three. So there's been some regression to the mean. That's to be expected. And then I think the other thing, Terry Rozier coming back into the team, he's just not been all that efficient apart from the Lakers game, the second half of the Warriors game. He's taken a lot of shots and not a lot of them are going to come in. And then I think they've just been getting used to having him out on the floor again. But like I mentioned earlier, they've been focusing on those defensive reboundings. Definitely more people crashing the glass. You've not seen as many of the kind of LaMelo full court passes. I don't think they had a single fast break point in the first half against Golden State. So I just think there's been a little bit of a refocus. And I think that happened after that Kings game when Borrego just decided, actually, we're going to have to kind of just tweak some things here and sacrifice some of the offensive end and we just kind of crashed down to earth a little bit now. I think Miles Bridges is like 34% now from three, and the Mellows, I think 38, something like that. So it's been a combination of factors really, and also just playing some better defenses. Like Golden State are number 1 or 2, I think, in defense. The Knicks, I know they're not great, but Tibbs always coaches a good defensive team. They've been playing some better teams, so that's going to pose some challenges at this point in the year.
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about, who the best lineups are, you mentioned PJ Washington, and you start to see Terry knock off some of the rust, shooting better the last couple of outings for the Charlotte Hornets team. They had 3 guys score 20 points when you discuss LaMelo, Terry, and Miles Bridges. Gordon Hayward certainly has that capability. He scored 10 against Golden State, but he's got the capability to score 20, and then you bring back PJ. James, how good can that lineup and that core be for Charlotte compared to everybody else in the Eastern Conference? And how good can that lineup be as far as a core to rely upon trying to get you to the playoffs and, who knows, maybe even contending in a first-round series?
I think offensively, it's probably one of the most potent lineups that can log heavy minutes. In terms of the playoffs, to be honest, it feels really small. I think it will struggle to get stops. I know PJ Washington was the best center option in this team last year. That's what Borrego said multiple times in post games. Yeah. I'd be interested to see what his thoughts are now if PJ were healthy, if he still thinks he's the best center on the roster. It's just a question we unfortunately don't know yet. For me, long term, it's not getting you past, just getting into the playoffs. I don't think, unless PJ makes a significant jump. I just don't think defensively the personnel there are good enough to be put on a scheme. You saw a lot of that lineup essentially playing last year in that Pacers match for the play-in tournament, and it was an absolute train wreck with people running into each other off inbounds. It's not going to be that bad, but it just wasn't good enough down towards the stretch of last year.
All right, let's get to some of the young guys. James Bouknight, Kai Jones, kind of going back and forth. They get their first action in Greensboro. How about Kai Jones? 15 points, 6 of 9 shooting, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 5 blocks in 34 minutes. I think you like to see that as much as anything. And then Bouknight scores 33, 9 of 22 shooting, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. But the 33 points there, that's the thing to take note of. Kai Jones, Bouknight, James, what do you think of those numbers, their first action in Greensboro, as well as if we see Bouknight at all this year? Just your thoughts on the rookies and how they can possibly impact the Hornets in 2021-22.
Yeah, it's a great start. You can't ask for much more, can you, really? I think Bouknight especially, he showed some real kind of deep threes, which I thought was impressive, I think, in the preseason. If he wasn't kind of right on the line, he kind of seemed to be leaning and pushing for it a little bit. So I think the fact he looked so comfortable pulling up from deep was positive. I also saw him getting more on-ball reps again, similar to Summer League, playing some point guard, being a lot more on the ball than he kind of was in college. I know that's something the team are trying to work with him about, being on the ball, but also moving it and not being worried about kind of getting it back. That's definitely something that he needs to work on. But will we see Bouknight this year? I think so. It happens every year in kind of the Hornets roster. It seems to happen where someone's out the roster, someone's out of the rotation at some point, and then by a month or 2 down the line, something happens. Someone is injured, someone's away. I don't know, and someone breaks into the rotation. The challenge that Buck's got at the moment is that the team needs defense, and the guy straight ahead of him is Cody Martin, who is probably having one of the best seasons of any second-round pick in Hornets history right at the moment, outside of probably Devontae Graham. He is playing so well, and he brings exactly what Borrego wants. You even saw Borrego finish the game against the Warriors with Cody over Gordon Hayward. So that's how much he's valuing him right now. So yeah. I don't think we're going to see Buck soon, but it'll be a couple of, something will happen. They're not just going to sit him on the bench for all year. He will get an opportunity at some point. I think fans just have to be patient.
All right, guys, I've been doing a lot of research. Cloris Leachman, illustrious film career in the 70s, Young Frankenstein, The Last Picture Show, Mary Tyler Moore. She was Beverly Ann Stickle on The Facts of Life. She was the granny in the Beverly Hillbillies 90s remake. She was the grandmother on Raising Hope, which had several seasons. But unfortunately, I have to break some bad news, Walker. She passed away this year.
Well, I knew that.
Well, good. I'm glad I didn't just. I'm glad I just didn't reveal that one of your relatives
I did know.
No longer
I
with
did
us.
know that she had passed away. That would be.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your
You
loss.
know, it's okay. We've look. I know we were very close. Even if I had never met her before, it did still hurt to lose my only famous
She's a
relative.
great actress.
Yeah, really was really in a lot of stuff. Why did I go to Longest Yard with that kind of illustrious career? That was the only thing I could think
It
of.
was a weird pick.
Well, and it's also a weird scene too, where there's her spanking Adam Sandler with a cowboy hat. Like that's how I'm gonna remember my long lost second removed aunt. I think
That's your lasting memory.
Yeah, but hey, Adam Sandler, that's fine. I think that's fine with me. All right, let's move on to something else besides Cloris Leachman spanking other celebrities. Last thing here, James, kind of looking at the Hornets going forward. That was a nice transition. What do you want to see from? What do you want to see from the Hornets against Washington? And how far do you think they can extend their winning streak with the schedule that is coming up for them on the horizon?
I think they've got a chance in Washington. Washington are playing well, but so the Hornets. I think it's a kind of a 50-50 game, if I had to call it. I think it'll be interesting to see, again, if this offense can pick back up. I'm hoping that other teams kind of haven't watched enough film now and scouted it and kind of figured out the plays and figured out what they need to do. So we need a bit of a bounce-back game. I'm petrified of Montrezl Harrell because he just feasts against the Hornets inside whenever he plays against them, and he's been having a good year. But the good news is like the starting lineup for the Hornets has been playing really well. I think they're the best lineup the Hornets have. We've played like over 100 minutes and they're plus 7.9, and that's with Terry Rozier in that starting lineup. So I think that bodes well. The Wizards' starting lineup has been terrible all season, and I think Bradley Beal's going to be out. But even that, their bench lineup has been the one that really getting them into a lot of these games. So we need the Hornets bench lineup to kind of bounce back a little bit from this slow start over the last kind of couple of weeks, really. And more Miles Bridges. Go on.
No, you're good, James. What were you going to say about Miles?
I was just going to say more Miles Bridges at center. I think those lineups have been positive so far. Washington aren't a huge team. Harrell, Gafford. I think he can kind of physical enough to be able to hang with a lot of those guys, and they're not going to want to guard him out in the perimeter. So that's something that I'd look going forward in that Washington game.
Well, and that's something real quickly before we get you out of here, too. I kind of want to talk, like, the small ball lineups, you mentioned it, they need more size. There's no doubt. We've always known the problem at center with the Charlotte Hornets team. But the idea is to not put so much of the bulk at center on P.J. Washington, so much even with a guy like Miles Bridges. And you are going to have more height on this team besides just a Mason Plumlee. You need somebody better defensively. Is there any way that you kind of stagger those small ball center minutes with a Miles and P.J. if Mason just isn't getting the job done? Now, you mentioned this too with Borrego. Like Borrego likes Mason Plumlee in there. You know, he could. I know some of this is just because you don't have a ton of options anywhere else, and so you got to roll with the tallest dude on your squad. But I think Borrego does legitimately like Mason. I think he does more than what he had last year. Even with that being said, do you like the idea of staggering PJ and Miles in order to take some of the small ball center minutes off of those guys' bodies?
I think for that to happen, Plumlee's minutes would have to drop significantly, because what I don't like is kind of playing those guys for 2 minutes at center and then getting no rhythm and the lineups being too choppy and changey if you're changing who your center is every kind of couple of minutes in the game. So I think if they were able to kind of log minutes together in big enough bunches that they're able to kind of get some rhythm and get used to playing with people, I don't mind looking at it, especially in certain matchups. We always know there's going to be certain teams where you're going to need big guys who can just physically handle them. But the offense is so much better. Like I really think that's the key to unlocking the Hornets offense. I mean, with Miles or PJ at center, the Hornets are an elite offensive team. And if we're going to have to we're not going to stop anyone defensively, but we might outscore some people. So I absolutely think it's something that should be looked at. Maybe when PJ's back. But I think, Plumlee would have to go down to like 12, 15 minutes a night for them to be able to stagger both PJ and Miles at the same time at center.
Yeah, I mean, it would be tough, but interesting to see maybe if they would go with Miles or if he just kind of stops playing center once PJ comes back altogether, if it's very rare once he's back from injury. All right, James, that was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Make sure you check out James' work at The Hive. You can follow that on Twitter at _the_Hive. You can also follow James on Twitter at British_Buzz. We're also going to get James Plowright an appearance here on the podcast at some point down the line. Can't wait for that. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate your time.
Anytime, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll take a quick break, but first I do want to discuss rockauto.com with you. Rockauto.com, somebody that has been a partner with us for quite some time here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Rockauto.com, it's with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? You can save time and money when using Rock Auto, so you don't have to choose to spend even up to 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or new car dealership. Go explore their easy-to-use website today. Find a solution to your auto parts needs, and then you can go to, again, rockauto.com, see the amazing selection, and see the reliably low prices. They have all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Also want to discuss Bet Online because they're back and they're better than ever. They've got a new web interface for the start of the basketball season, and they also have more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. Bet Online is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet Online, where the game starts. Doug Branson, he comes in and contributes a little bit more here on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
This is Locked On Hornets.
Assets, and you have to wonder, is there a time for them to do that now? No, is he
the center position?
I mean, it's yes. Yeah, God, Mitch, make a trade.
That's just good. That's just good sports talk right there.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Great stuff from James Plowright. Really enjoyed going behind the numbers there with the offense and the defense, what we've seen lately, what we've seen from the Hornets all around this season. Doug, what were some of your biggest takeaways from the research done by one James Plowright?
Well, I'm just glad that we can rely on smart basketball people like James Plowright to come in and give us the info so that we can be silly,
so we can
mess
clown
around. So we can clown. But really interesting stuff. He brings up Montrezl Harrell, for this Wizards game coming up on Wednesday. That's really interesting, right? Because the Hornet, if you remember, the Hornets offered Harrell a contract. I believe it was when he was right before he signed with the Lakers.
Right.
And they offered him more money. And Harrell said, nah, I'm going to go try to win a championship with these guys, which, in retrospect, not a terrible call. But he did spurn these Hornets. So if you want some extra fuel to your fire, I think him and Terry also kind of had words in one of those late season matchups against the Lakers. So there's some dust flying around.
Well,
maybe
even just
on this
speaking
one.
of Montrez, remember the Lakers weren't playing him. They just decided they weren't going to go to him because defensively he's such a liability, and that's one of the more interesting things. Offensively he's really going to help, and James talked about that. But defensively, where this team really needs help inside, I don't know that he addresses that. And he
wouldn't have helped.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been this huge drop off because you'd still be able to score a decent amount of points. But defensively, it's not like he's contesting at the rim and really hurting teams once they try to get into the paint. I think you just look at PJ being out for this team. The fact that they were able to get a few wins with PJ out, Doug, I think you tweeted about that. That's huge. And when he comes back, it really is going to help the squad so much more. I love Jalen McDaniels getting in there. I wouldn't have ever thought through 15 games I would have been excited at Cody Martin flirting with 30 minutes here and there. But look, I've said it a couple times too. He's even impressing me more offensively with what he's brought to his game than he is defensively. I'm not saying he's playing bad on that end of the floor. I just think he's doing so much more on the offensive end, getting, cutting to the basket, right, getting hit with some nice feeds down low, as well as being able to hit at a higher clip. It's just the guy's really improved. He works really hard. That's a cliche. We could say that about all NBA players, but Cody really has very much so improved, and it's nice to see.
And we can say that all NBA players are immensely talented and physically gifted, but I don't know that you can say that every player works hard. I mean, that's what separates the really good players from your average NBA players most of the time, is just their ability to get into the gym and work on things and evolve as a player and execute the game plan. So, but what I'd like to say on Jalen McDaniels is that I think that James brings in some really great insight, because we had talked about how his offense had fallen off. And I think maybe there's some context there that maybe this team is asking Jalen McDaniels to come in and we don't need offense, Jalen. We need intense defense. So focus on that end of the floor, because he had some 20 plus point games earlier in the season. It's not like Jalen McDaniels is incapable of contributing there, but I think right now they need him to focus almost exclusively on locking down wings on the defensive end. And from James's perspective, he's been able to do that.
Well, and that's what I've always loved too. Is it's somebody that's 6'10" that can legitimately play three. When you are as small as you are, man, is he? So Nick Richards, Vernon Carey, Mason Plumlee, those are your traditional centers. But then it's like McDaniels. That's the tallest guy. I made this point. I think when they played the Lakers, it was Jalen McDaniels contesting a fadeaway shot from Anthony Davis, and the announcer was like, "Yeah, Anthony Davis he's going to eat that matchup all night long." It's like, well, that's basically the second tallest player we have on the roster that's going to get significant minutes. It's Mason Plumlee and it's Jalen McDaniels with a hint of Nick Richards every now and then. That's what we got. We don't have anything else, and so he's going to feast against anybody. And real quickly with McDaniels, what was nice about him too, he actually started really hot from three at the beginning of the year. He went 7 of 12.
He's capable.
Yeah, very much so. And I believe in that stroke. Hopefully he starts to hit more as the season goes on, but he is starting to play a little more consistently. 22, 11, and 21 minutes he's logged in these last 3 games.
Well, listen, there's going to be a time similar to when Kelly Oubre had his 37. That was when Miles Bridges wasn't hitting anything and Terry Rozier wasn't hitting anything. You get into the third quarter and a couple of starters aren't hitting what they normally hit, and you look to the bench and you say, hey, who's going to step up and knock down some shots? And you've seen that Jalen McDaniels previously has the capability to put up 20 points in a game. And so that's what makes a certified bench wrench a certified bench wrench. You can't find those at an Ace Hardware. Those are really rare birds. And I think Jalen McDaniels is capable of that. And I'm just going to say that I don't think it's the last time that we've seen the Jalen McDaniels bench wrench performance out of him. I'll also say this: the Eastern Conference right now is completely topsy-turvy. If you haven't, it's upside down. If you haven't paid attention to the standings, right now the Raptors are 7-8, they're 10th place. Boston 7-7. Hornets are sitting at 8th at 8-7, one game over 500. This is only the 4th time. I'm going to shock you with this stat. You ready for this interesting stat?
Bring it. I'm ready.
This is only the 4th time in the past 21 years that the Eastern Conference has been ahead of the Western Conference in wins at this point in the season. They're winning the interconference battle this late into the season for the first time, or only 4 times in the past 20 years. So the Eastern Conference is strong, but it's also upside down, and the Hornets are picking up important wins that will help them when all of this shakes out.
Well, and, Golden State is huge, right? If you want to do the age-old game of win the games you're supposed to, lose the games you're supposed to, which ones can you cancel out? Maybe you're supposed to beat Cleveland,
Love
Sacramento.
that. I love that age-old game.
It's an
old as backgammon.
Yeah. Good old Mancala type game right there. When you got to have marbles to play Mancala, and that's what we're doing here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. When you look at the Charlotte Hornets, they get that win against Golden State. Maybe it makes up for the loss to Sacramento, right? So hopefully the Hornets can continue to pile those up.
What loss to Sacramento? I've already forgotten it. That's how huge. I think Golden State, if you beat Golden State, that should literally cancel out 2 losses on your schedule. I think Adam Silver should come in and say, wipe 2 of them away.
It should be like cornhole. That's what it should be like. Cancel out the points, and I feel like that should
It's
happen.
a game as old as cornhole.
Real quick.
Walker, we did not make enough. I played it right at the end of the last show, and I would be remiss if we don't play the entire Eric Collins call of the tap that Terry wins. This is a luxury that we have because the Hornets have a day off. They've had 2 days where they haven't played games, so we get to kind of dig a little bit deeper than we normally would. We don't have to move on to the next game immediately. But I would love if you would allow me. I know I'm just right back on the show. I'm asking a lot. I burst through the door and now I want, blue M&Ms in my dressing room. I get it. I understand. I understand, but I would love to play this call if you'll allow me.
You're a diva, but go ahead. You're my diva.
I think the listeners will enjoy this too. Here we go.
So it's Green and Rozier. Terry won it! Terry won the tap! Terry won it!
He's very excited. Can we talk about the tap just a little bit, though? Like,
No. It seemed like a very fair tap. I thought. Listen. The refs did a lot of. Listen, the refs were horrible that game, but the one area that they got right in that game was the fairness of that jump ball.
It was as straight up as an arrow, right? It wasn't favoring Terry whatsoever. Draymond was disgusted at that thrown ball where he kind of even looked. He didn't have a shot to get that, and he just looked at Terry up and down, mean mugging him like Draymond Green is one to do. Look, man, Terry got it, though. That's fine. If you're going to give him a little leeway against a player like that, I'll take it, and I won't apologize whatsoever for it.
I don't apologize for anything.
Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every single day. Coming up tomorrow, Wes Bryant, Wes Wednesdays, Bally Sports, Charlotte Hornets Insider going to be discussing the Charlotte Hornets 3-game winning streak. I'm sure he's got a good list for us, too. Finally getting back on track since they're back at home. So Wes Bryant going to be hopping on with us tomorrow. Now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 daily fantasy basketball show on the planet, and it's free, and it's available on all platforms. We'll be back with you tomorrow with Wes Bryant.